My 8-year-old son was being bullied at his new school because of the burn scars that ran along his arms and shoulder, the scars that had taken 5 years to heal, both on his skin and in my heart. When the school failed to protect him, I thought I was ready to confront his bully's family myself. What I didn't know was that doing so would uncover a truth buried deep in both our pasts, one that would change everything I believed about loss, courage, and forgiveness. But before I tell you how my son's scars revealed a secret that tied 2 families together, let me take you back to the day he first asked me a question that shattered me completely. My name is Daniel Carter, and for the past 5 years, I've been a single father. My wife, Rachel, died in an apartment explosion that tore through our building one night while I was working the late shift. I'll never forget the call from the hospital. The sterile smell of the ICU, the sight of my son, Liam, lying in a hospital bed wrapped in bandages, his tiny body covered in burns. They told me he was lucky to be alive, but when I looked at him, I didn't see luck. I saw pain, pure, innocent pain. We moved to Fairgrove, a quiet town outside Seattle, hoping for a fresh start. I found a steady job at a local electrical firm, and Liam started at Riverside Elementary. He was bright, endlessly curious, and had a heart far too gentle for this world. His favorite things were dinosaurs, Lego, and bedtime stories about explorers. I used to think that if anyone could rise above tragedy, it would be him. But children can be cruel, especially to someone who looks different. At first, it was just whispers, stares in the cafeteria, the kind of quiet exclusion that chips away at your confidence one glance at a time. Then came the words, sharp, deliberate, and poisonous. One evening, while I was helping Liam with his spelling homework, I noticed he was unusually quiet. His little fingers trembled as he held the pencil. I asked him what was wrong. He hesitated, then whispered, "Dad, am I a monster?" I froze. The pencil slipped from my hand. "What did you just say?" His eyes filled with tears. "Noah said I look like a monster. He said that's why Mom died, because monsters don't have normal families." It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Every breath burned. I knelt beside him, taking his small hands in mine. "Liam, look at me," I said softly. "You are not a monster. You're the bravest boy I know. Those scars? They're proof that you survived something no child should ever have to. They're proof that you fought, and you lived." He nodded weakly, but didn't meet my eyes. "Then why do people hate them?" "Because sometimes people fear what they don't understand," I said. "And when they're scared, they say cruel things." That night, long after Liam fell asleep, I stood by his door, watching the soft rise and fall of his chest under the moonlight. I promised myself that whatever it took, I would protect him. From the whispers, the stares, the lies. What I didn't know was that keeping that promise would lead me straight to the man whose choices had once determined whether my son lived or died. And that man was the father of my son's bully. The next few weeks were the hardest I'd faced since the fire. Liam's mornings turned from cheerful chatter about dinosaurs to silence. He used to run down the hallway, backpack bouncing, ready for another adventure. Now he lingered at the door, staring at the floor, whispering, "Do I have to go?" I'd tried to believe things would get better, that kids were just being kids. But denial is a dangerous comfort. The truth came crashing in one afternoon when I got a call from the school nurse. Liam had a bruised knee, a torn sleeve, and swollen eyes. When I picked him up, he clung to me, trembling. "Noah pushed me down the stairs," he whispered. "He said monsters shouldn't walk where normal kids do." Something inside me snapped. That night, I examined the bruises on my son's legs. the scratch near his elbow that reopened one of the burn scars. I wanted to call the police. I wanted justice. But more than that, I wanted to know why this kept happening while the adults in charge looked away. The next morning, I sat across from Ms. Roberts, Liam's teacher. Her face was kind, but her words were useless. "I've spoken with Noah several times," she said. "He's been having difficulties at home. His father's going through a lot." "So that excuses him breaking my son's arm next?" I shot back. Her lips tightened. "Please, Mr. Carter, we're handling this." But they weren't. When I went to see the principal, Mr. Green, he hid behind policies and paperwork. "We're taking this seriously," he said. "We're organizing a school-wide anti-bullying assembly next month." "Next month?" I could barely keep my voice steady. "My son's terrified now." He gave a sympathetic nod. The kind that means absolutely nothing. "We'll be monitoring the situation closely." By the time I left his office, my hands were shaking. I looked at the framed poster on the wall. "Every child feels safe here." It felt like a cruel joke. That night, Liam refused dinner. He sat by his window, hugging his dinosaur plush. "Dad," he whispered, "can we move again? Please?" I crouched beside him. "Why, buddy?" "Because Noah said he knows what happened. He said he knows why I look like this." That made me stop cold. "What do you mean he knows?" "He said his dad told him." Those words hit me like ice water down my spine. How could Noah's father possibly know anything about that night? The explosion had made the local news, but no one had ever mentioned names. Something didn't fit. As Liam drifted into uneasy sleep, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the glow of my phone screen. The school directory was open in front of me. My hand hovered over one name. Mark Turner, Noah's father. If the school wouldn't protect my son, then I would. And before dawn, I'd already decided. I was going to look that man in the eye and find out exactly what he thought he knew. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of weather that makes even silence feel heavy. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam's face, bruised, trembling, and far too old for his years. By 8 a.m., I was standing in front of Mark Turner's house. It was smaller than I expected, an old one-story home on the edge of town, half hidden behind a line of bare maple trees. The paint was peeling and the yard was overgrown. But what struck me most were the signs of someone who used to care. An old motorcycle under a tarp, a rusting swing set in the yard, and a faded firefighter's helmet sitting on the porch rail. When he opened the door, I almost lost my nerve. He was tall, built like a man who'd once been strong but hadn't slept well in years. His hair was streaked with gray, his eyes shadowed. There were burn scars on his hands. Old, faded, but unmistakable. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice rough, guarded. "You're Mark Turner?" "That's right. I'm Daniel Carter. My son Liam goes to school with your boy Noah." Recognition flickered in his eyes. His shoulders stiffened. "I see." "I think you already do," I said. "May I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Yeah, sure." The inside of the house was neat but empty, like a place kept clean out of habit, not pride. On the wall hung framed newspaper clippings, all fire department commendations, photos of rescue teams. But one plaque was turned face down. We sat in his living room. He didn't offer coffee. He just waited. "Your son's been bullying mine for weeks," I said, calling him names, hurting him, saying things that... My voice cracked. Things about his mother's death, about his scars. Mark's eyes flicked up sharply. "His scars?" "Burn scars, on his right arm and shoulder. He was 3 when the apartment explosion happened." The color drained from his face. "Explosion?" "Silver Lake Apartments," I said. 5 years ago. His hand trembled slightly. He looked down at it as if it were someone else's hand entirely. Silver Lake, he repeated quietly. Yes, my wife, Rachel, didn't make it. My son barely survived, and now your kid is tormenting him for the scars that remind us both of that night. Mark stood up so suddenly his chair scraped the floor. Can I see them? What? The scars, please. I frowned. Why would you need to see my son's scars? His voice broke. Because I think I've seen them before. Something in his tone, raw, almost panicked, froze me. Against my better judgment, I pulled out my phone and showed him a recent picture of Liam at the beach. The scars were visible, curling over his arm like pale rivers under the sun. Mark stared at the photo, his breathing uneven. Then he whispered, My God. I leaned forward. What is it? He looked up, and for a moment his eyes were full of something I couldn't name. Horror, grief, recognition. I know those scars, he said, voice shaking. Because I was there that night. What are you talking about? The Silver Lake explosion, he said quietly. I was the firefighter who pulled your son out of that building. The room seemed to tilt. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. That's impossible, I said. The firefighter who saved him, his name was Turner. Mark nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. Mark Eugene Turner. That was me. And just like that, I realized I was standing in the living room of the man who had once carried my son out of the flames, and who now was raising the boy that made him suffer again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ticking clock on his wall was the only sound between us, steady and cruel. Mark sank back into his chair, elbows on his knees, head bowed. I never thought I'd see either of you again, he said finally, his voice hoarse. But I see your son's face every time I close my eyes. I swallowed hard. You were really there that night? He nodded slowly. March 14th, 5 years ago. Silver Lake Apartments. 4th floor collapsed halfway through the rescue. I was the first one in. My breath caught. I could still see it. The smoke-choked stairwell, the screams, the sirens, the smell of burning plastic. I had arrived minutes too late, after they'd pulled Liam out. Mark's hands trembled as he rolled up his sleeves, revealing long, jagged scars along both forearms. I wasn't supposed to be there that shift. My partner called out sick. We got the call at 2:07 a.m. Gas line rupture. Probable explosion. When we reached your building, the fire was already eating through the support beams. He paused, eyes unfocused, as though he was back inside the flames. I found your wife unconscious in the hallway, and I heard your son crying from the next room. The smoke was too thick, the ceiling was cracking. I knew I couldn't make 2 trips. I felt my heart twist. You had to choose. His jaw tightened. I did. I carried the boy out. By the time I turned back, the stairwell gave in. I tried to go around the balcony, but it was too late. The heat, it was like standing inside the sun. He wiped his eyes roughly. I broke 3 ribs that night. My shoulder's still half metal, but the worst pain isn't physical. It's knowing I left someone behind. I let out a shaky breath. You didn't have a choice. Mark shook his head. Try telling that to a 5-year-old who watched his mother leave because she couldn't live with a broken man. I stared at him, realization dawning. Your wife, she left? He nodded, hollow. 2 years after the fire. Said I wasn't the same. She was right. I wasn't. And Noah, he changed too. He started asking questions. He'd heard the story somewhere, that I'd let a woman die. I never told him the truth. I thought I was protecting him, but he's been angry ever since. Angry at me. Angry at everything. He rubbed his temples, defeated. I didn't know it was your boy he was taking it out on. God help me, I didn't know. For the first time since the fire, I saw the man who had risked his life for my son, not as a hero, but as a father living with unbearable guilt. I stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't fail her, Mark. You saved the only person who could still be saved. My son has a future because of you. He looked up at me, eyes red, voice breaking. I thought saving him cost me my soul. I met his gaze. Maybe that boy will be the one who gives it back. Mark didn't speak for a long while after that. He just sat there, breathing heavily, his scarred hands clasped so tightly they turned white. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, "He needs to know. Noah deserves the truth, even if it destroys the way he sees me." I nodded. "If you want, I'll stay." He gave a weak smile. "Maybe you should. He needs to see what his words have done." Mark called his son downstairs. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway before a small, tense voice said, "What?" When Noah appeared, he looked smaller than I expected. A boy, barely 9, with dark hair and anger written across his face like armor. The moment he saw me, his expression hardened. "Why is he here?" "Sit down," Mark said quietly. "No. Sit down, Noah." His tone was firm now, commanding, the voice of a man who had once led others into burning buildings. Noah froze, then sat, arms crossed, eyes darting between us. "This is Mr. Carter," Mark said. "He's Liam's father." "I didn't do anything," Noah said quickly. "He's lying. He started it." Mark's jaw tightened. "Stop. We both know that's not true." Noah scowled. "He's weird, Dad. Everyone says so. He's got those scars." Mark finished for him. "You mean his scars?" Noah's voice faltered. "Yeah." Mark drew a deep breath, then said, "Do you know how he got them?" Noah shrugged. "Mom said something about a fire." Mark nodded slowly. "That's right. A fire. The Silver Lake explosion." He paused, then looked at me for a moment before turning back to his son. "Noah, 5 years ago I was there. I was the one who carried that boy out of the fire." Noah frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. "You mean Liam?" "Yes," Mark said. "I pulled him out of the flames while his mother was trapped inside. I tried to go back for her, but I couldn't. The building collapsed. I almost died too." Noah's face went blank. "You saved him?" "I did," Mark whispered. "And I've lived with the guilt of not saving his mother every single day since. You've been calling that boy a monster for the same scars that came from the fire I put him through to save his life." The words hung heavy in the air. Noah's lips parted, but no sound came out. He looked at his father as if seeing him for the first time. Then, his shoulders started to shake. "Dad," his voice cracked. "You let her die?" Mark's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't let her die. I couldn't save her. There's a difference, son." Noah covered his face, sobbing. "I thought you were a coward. I thought that's why Mom left." Mark reached for him, his voice trembling. "I wasn't a coward. I was broken. And in trying to hide that, I made you broken too." Noah shook his head. "I didn't know, Dad. I didn't know he was the boy." "I know," Mark said, pulling him close. "But you can make it right." The room fell quiet except for Noah's muffled crying. Finally, he turned to me and whispered, "Can I tell him I'm sorry?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. He'd like that very much. But more than an apology, I think Liam would want a friend. Noah nodded firmly, wiping his tears. "I can do that." The following Monday morning, I walked Liam to school myself. He was nervous, holding my hand tighter than usual. "What if Noah's mean again?" he asked softly.
"Then you come find me," I said. "But I don't think he will be." As we stepped through the front doors, Noah was waiting. His father stood behind him, silent, solemn. Noah walked up to Liam. "Hey," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. For everything." Liam looked unsure, glancing at me. "Why?" "Because I was wrong," Noah said. "My dad told me about the fire. He said you're not a monster. You're a hero. The bravest person he's ever met." Liam blinked, stunned. "Your dad was there?" Noah nodded. "He saved you." Liam turned to look at Mark, who knelt down, his eyes glassy. "You're the one who carried me out," Liam whispered. Mark smiled gently. "And I'd do it again." The two boys stood there, silent for a moment, before Noah extended his hand. "Friends?" Liam hesitated, then smiled faintly and shook it. "Friends." As the two of them walked toward their classroom, I looked at Mark. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked lighter, like the weight he'd carried for years had finally begun to lift. Neither of us knew that fate would test us again, and far sooner than we could imagine. Spring came late that year, but Fairgrove felt warmer than it had in a long time. For weeks after that day at school, Liam laughed again, really laughed. He and Noah became inseparable, spending afternoons building Lego forts and trading dinosaur cards. I saw light returning to my boy's eyes, and for the first time since Rachel's death, our home felt alive again. Mark began coming around too. He helped Liam with a school project about fire safety, and I could tell it meant something to him, like he was rebuilding the part of himself he'd buried in guilt. He even took a job as a part-time safety supervisor at Riverside Elementary, saying it felt like a second chance to protect the ones who still had a future. I thought the worst was behind us. But life has a cruel way of testing the peace you think you've earned. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was driving back from work when I saw the column of black smoke twisting above the trees. Thick, violent, and close. My heart stopped when I recognized the building. Riverside Elementary. Traffic was chaos, parents screaming, sirens wailing in the distance. I abandoned my car halfway up the street and ran. The air burned my lungs as I sprinted toward the courtyard, where terrified children were being rushed outside. But two names were missing from every teacher's list: Liam and Noah. I pushed through the crowd, shouting my son's name, when someone grabbed my arm, a firefighter I didn't know. "You can't go in there," he yelled. "My son's inside." Before he could answer, another voice cut through the smoke. "Carter!" It was Mark. He was already half covered in soot, pulling on a respirator. "They're in the East Wing," he shouted. "Science room." "Then I'm going with you." "No." His eyes locked onto mine, calm and fierce at once. "You trusted me once before, remember?" And before I could stop him, he ran straight into the flames. I stood there helpless, watching that same man disappear into a sea of orange, the same man who had carried my son out of one fire 5 years ago. Minutes stretched into hours. Then, through the roar and chaos, I saw movement. A figure stumbling from the smoke, clutching two small shapes wrapped in soaked blankets. It was Mark. His uniform was burned, his face streaked with ash, but his grip never faltered. He laid the boys down gently on the grass before collapsing beside them. "Mark!" I shouted, dropping to my knees. Paramedics swarmed us. Liam coughed, opened his eyes, and whispered through cracked lips, "He saved us again, Dad." Mark's eyes fluttered open, weak but steady. I squeezed his hand. "5 years ago you saved my son once," I said, choking on the words. "Today you saved him again. And yours too." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from peace, not pride.
Maybe that's what I was meant for. Weeks later, when the hospital let him out, we gathered at our backyard for a small dinner. Me, Liam, Noah, and Mark. The scars on his hands were darker now, but his eyes were clear. As the boys chased fireflies through the dusk, Mark watched them and murmured, "Maybe scars aren't reminders of what we lost, but of what we kept alive." I looked at him. The man who once carried my child through fire and who'd walked through another to save him again, and realized he was right. Because sometimes it's not the fire that defines us. It's how many times we walk through it for the people we love. That night, after everyone went home and the laughter faded into quiet, I stood by Liam's bedroom door, just like I used to years ago. He was asleep, his arm resting outside the blanket, the faint silver scars glinting in the soft lamplight. I realized then that those scars no longer told a story of pain or loss. They told a story of survival, courage, and second chances. Mark Turner once believed the fire had taken everything from him: his marriage, his purpose, his faith in himself. But it hadn't taken his heart. It had only hidden it behind the same flames that had burned him. And somehow, through a twist of fate, my son, the boy he once carried from the ashes, had become the reason he found it again. Sometimes life brings people back into your path, not for closure, but for redemption. Sometimes the ones who saved us once need saving themselves the second time around. If you've ever carried guilt so heavy it felt like a fire that never stopped burning, remember this. There's always someone whose life your courage has already changed, even if you don't know it yet. Because scars don't define who we are. They remind us that we're still here, and that every mark, every burn, every heartbreak can be the start of something stronger. So tell me, what moment in your life turned your pain into strength? Share it in the comments below. Your story might be the light someone else needs to see tonight. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories about forgiveness, courage, and the power of second chances. We'll see you in the next one.